Today we're going to learn the basics of green screen compositing using After Effects. So once you've opened up the program, we'll double click in the project panel and we will go to our assets and we will import that folder. And we've got two assets. We've got our background and we've got our green screen foreground. So what we're going to start with is we're going to take the background and we're going to drag it into this comp window right here. And then that's going to make a composition that's the size of that background. And it's not 1080p, but the way this composition lines out, we need this foreground to make it work, and we don't want to cut off the dragon's head. So we'll just work in this aspect ratio for this particular assignment. Next thing we will do is we'll take our foreground layer and we'll drag that on top, and we will, I'm going to click on that layer and we'll twirl this down, and we'll twirl down transform, and we will kind of scale it down a little bit for our evil purposes. Now the next thing we're going to do with this, is cut out the mask and get all the ugly stuff out, so that all we have is green in our background. And so with this layer selected, we will click on the pen tool, and we will then carefully just click on the parts that are green, and this needs to get moved up a little bit. And so in order to continue this mask, we need to click on that file there, that point there, and continue forward. And now we have an all green area, and if we take a look at our talent, we will see that she remains in the shot. There's points where her sword comes out of the shot, but we'll just have to live with that. That's technically a mistake. Alright, so our mask is good. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to take out the green screen. And so what we will do is we will go to here in the Effects and Presets panel. We will go to Keying, and with this layer selected, we will double click on Key Light, and that will bring open the Effects panel. And we have two windows here, the effect and the project. And the first thing we're going to do is take our screen color, and somewhere around here we will click and tell it to be green, and that does a real good basic job of just getting rid of all of the green, but it's not perfect. And so the next thing that we will do is we will go into Screen Matte View, and we will adjust this matte. And what we want to do is we want to make everything around the silhouette black, and we want our silhouette to be perfectly white, and that will give us the best key as possible. So we will crank up the black clip until everything is black. That's pretty good, right around 71. And then we'll pull down the white clip. And what I'm doing is I'm just holding down on this number and holding down on the mouse and dragging left. You can, however, grab the slider by twirling that down, and we'll just pull it down until she is white, but not so far that it starts freaking out on us. Now we will go back to our final result view, and we've got a pretty good key to start with. This is the anchor point, and eventually let's get to where our hero. So basically our talent, once she makes this step forward, she kind of keeps this foot basically there. So we're going to move our anchor point to that position, and the best way to do it is with this area, with this layer selected, we will click on the pan behind tool. It's also known as the anchor point tool, and they should just call it the anchor point tool because pan behind has no meaning. And we will drag that point right to that foot, and if we scale, we will see that it's all now scaling based on that position, and that's going to make our lives a lot easier. So now let's just kind of scale her down until it feels like she's the right size. Too little, and that's not much of a challenge. Right around there seems like she's got her work cut out for her. And I'm now going to click on the, what do they call this tool? The selection tool. And we will position her where we think we want her to be. And let's try that. And I'm going to roll back and hit the space bar. And let's see what she does. Alright. So her action looks really good. I'm actually kind of cutting off her foot right there, but I kind of like how it's touching that background. So it kind of looks like it's emerging from that background, so I'm going to say that's a cool thing. Alright. So now we've got our basic size right, and our basic action, and all of this looks really good. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a shadow to really kind of like plant her in this world, and the shadows are really important. So I'm going to click on that file, and I'm going to hit Command D, and then I'm going to hit return, and I'm going to type in the word shadow and hit return again, and basically we've duplicated that layer. I'm going to turn off the audio because we don't need that. So now with our shadow, we will go into our color correction tools, and what we want to do is grab hue and saturation, and we'll drag that into the shadow layer. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our master saturation all the way down and our master lightness all the way down, and now that gives us a matching outline for our shadow. We are going to now click on the 3D box, and we will come down to our rotation effects, and we are going to tilt this down to 90 degrees. And that's a little too far, so I'm just going to click in there, type in 90. And then that'll give us a good starting shadow. And we'll see how that the shadow tracks with her the whole way. So that looks pretty good. We kind of lose it here a little bit with this foot, so I want to rotate it on that Z rotation. And let's see how that tracks. That matches a little bit better. And I'm going to push it in and pull it right a little bit more and rotate it a little bit more. Let's see how that plays. Alright, so now we've got our feet matching the shadow. Next thing I want to do is I want to go into scale. We're going to unclick the scale, and we are going to make our shadow longer. And that means we need to rotate it a little bit more. And let's make the shadow a little fatter. I'm going to, no, can't do fatter. We'll lose our feet. Alright, so let's see how everything matches here. Our feet are matching pretty good, because now what we're going to do is we're going to soften our shadow. So with that collected, we will go over to our presets, and we will get into the blur, and we're going to take fast blur, and we'll drag it onto the layer. And let's crank up the flash blur. Let's look at 70 maybe. So there's a nice little blurry shadow, and we want to decrease the opacity a little bit so that it blends with kind of the shadows that we have already. And so somewhere around 60% gives us this nice little shadow that really kind of plants our talent in the story. Okay, now we're ready for color correction. And so we will come back to our foreground, and we will scroll down to synthetic aperture. And so with that selected, I can just double click on synthetic aperture and it's going to open up in our effects panel. So we're going to first click on full interface. And when Color Finesse opens, there will be a little registration box. Type in your name and hit return, or just your first name, it doesn't matter, but you got to enter something, otherwise if you don't, it will create this pink grid that will render, which is just basically more annoying than anything else. And every time you use After Effects in the building, you'll need to use that. You'll always need to re-register. Okay, so now we're going to start our basic color correction settings. First thing what we want to do though is we want to bring our background in here to help us kind of match what's going on with our hero. So let's click on Gallery, and we are going to click on this first box that will help it tell it that it will let us import the image, and we will import our background. And then we'll click this box to tell it to use that background. Okay. And over here we're going to hit split reference, and basically it will give us a feeling of what our background is as we begin our basic color correction. Back here in this panel we will hit combo so that we can see the monitors, and basically the RGB color parade is the most important monitor for us as we make our adjustments. So if we look at our world, we'll see that it's blue and green, and it's actually more yellow than you would expect. So that's what we're going to kind of start messing with. First thing we'll do is we will mess with our RGB settings, and we're going to take the master gamma and we're going to pull it down to about there. We're going to take our red gamma, and gamma is basically our mid-level settings, and pedestal is our black setting. So if we adjust our pedestal, you'll see how the blacks rise up and become kind of useless. And our gain setting adjusts the brightness in the highlights. So we're going to take our red gamma and we are going to bring it down to about half. We're going to take our green pedestal and bring it down ever so slightly. We're going to take our blue gamma and we're going to make this scene a little more blue, and we're going to crank that up to about 1.2. We're going to take our so that's been our master settings. Now we'll click on our midtones, and we will take our midtone red gamma up a little bit to 2.08. Ish. And our red pedestal, we're going to raise that up just a little bit. Okay. So let's click OK, and see what we've got in our world. And by clicking this on and off, we get a better sense of what our hero is doing in here. So now that we're got our basic settings, we can go into the simplified interface and make some more minor corrections. And so in this world, we need to make her more blue and more green. And so we will go into our midtones and let's raise up the blue gamma. Let's raise up the green gamma. Ooh, that's helping. And in our hue, saturation, and lightness, I want to make her, I want to pull down the saturation a little bit. So we will pull that down. So I really like how her skin feels like it's part of this world. We're just a little too dark here. And so let's go back into our master gamma and raise it back up again a little bit. And let's take a look at what this feels like. So that feels pretty good to me in terms of putting her in our world. Now the last thing that we want to do is we want to create an adjustment layer and create a dark vignette around the edges of this. And so with our comp selected, we will go to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, and I will hit return and we will type in vignette, and I'll hit return again. And then what I want you to do is to scroll down and pick this ellipse tool and double click it. And then we have, this is our mask. And so getting close to one of these points, and this little squirrel point will come up. Click on that and select that dot, and what we'll do is we'll pull this down so it's so we've got our dragon's face. We're going to darken everything to the left of our hero. We're going to darken the ground on our hero. And we're going to darken a little bit of the back of our dragon. We'll then twirl down our mask. And right now, it is set to, with add, it's set to darken the center. So let's go ahead and darken it, and I'll show you what that means. We'll grab from color correction, we'll grab levels, and we'll drag it in here, and we will pull the gamma down. But this is not what we want. We don't want the middle. So what we will do is we will we'll hit subtract, and it'll pull it down on the outside. Now I'm going to turn off this little switch so that we don't see our mask, and it will then allow us to adjust our feather. And I'm going to click and hold and drag the feather until we see it, but we don't see it. And so this kind of puts a nice little edge around it that makes the whole thing more complete. I like how our skin here is that same color there. I like her darkness. I like her shadow. Now it's time to export. We'll go to File, Export, Add to Render Queue. We will click on our output. I'm going to tell it to go to my folder, and you'll type in your name, our name, and then GS for green screen. And hit save. And then we will tell it what we want it to be. So when we click on this, we will click on Format Options, and we want to make it, let's make it H.264. Okay. And that's all we need to do there. We will hit render, and it'll render our image, and then post that in the Dropbox. Good luck.